Okay, so the resources that I'm going to be assessing for accessibility today are going to be a Google Slides presentation and then a worksheet. I'm going to start with the Google Slides presentation. This is a really important presentation, so I definitely want to make sure this is accessible. Right now, from my first analysis of this, it is not great accessibility-wise. It needs some work. Starting off, the outline of this is not in the right order, so if a student were to use Screen Reader to go through this, some of the slides are in the right order, some are not. So for example, you can see I'm tabbing through and the tab is on these kind of orange purple blobs that are there to be decorative, but the screen reader is going to be confused by that. And then it goes up to the text up here. That's the case for a couple of these slides. For example, this one goes to the pictures first, and then goes up to the heading, and then goes down here. So as far as how this is ordered, it's going to need a lot of work for any of the slides that I tried to make visually appealing here. That'll be an easy fix. I'm just going to make these vertical and probably honestly take out the pictures. They're not super necessary. This picture and this picture are not necessary for the questions. I have enough photos later on to make this more visually appealing. So I would just make this vertical and just maybe even make these texts a little bit bigger with bullet points so a screen reader knows exactly what to read there and in what order. Also, there's a lot of images here that I never really thought about if someone were to use screen reader or if they were not able to see the image, how they would kind of get this information. This image is the most important. It is a very important graphic that describes how hate and prejudice can escalate all the way to genocide. Now, this is something I describe to my in-person learners face to face, but if someone were to do screen reader for this, it would not be readable. So I would have to do format, format options, and I would describe this in depth. So I would start with the prejudice attitudes and then write exactly word for word that, what that means and how it escalates. So I would have to do that definitely for this image. I do have some other images down here that are not as important. I mean, this is an image of a Holocaust survivor, but I would maybe just say a Holocaust survivor image. But this image that's also up here in this slide, these two are the most important that I would definitely want to describe in the box. Now, something that is important about this slide here is when I click on the picture, when I present this in person, it takes you to the link that takes you to the video of the Holocaust survivor. Now, in person, this is very effective, but if this were to be an online class and someone was, again, needed more accessibility options, I would probably take this picture out and I would just write link to Milton Belfer testimony. Click here. Very, very explicit. I would also take this out because, again, it wouldn't be necessary for a online class for accessibility options. So I would remove these two pictures and instead just put the explicit link in there with those exact words. Now, another easy fix, but one thing that I am noticing, I at first really liked these colors on my slides instead of just plain black for the in-person learner. But to be more accessible and just to really be, like do the contrast that students may need, I would just delete these little pink blobs if I were to make this more accessible for an online learner. It looks cool for me right now, but it would definitely be easier to read without those pink blobs there. Okay, so that is my assessment of my pyramid of hate Google Slides. Now moving on to a worksheet. So I've done this worksheet both printed out and also online. And what this is it is a CNN article about how a Twilight Zone episode that we watch and that we read is very much like the pandemic. So this is a pretty big article that we analyze in depth. So I like students to go through and first just take apart the article structure wise. So I teach them about these 5 text structures for nonfiction articles. And initially, I wanted them to go through, and if they identified any structure that's cause and effect, they would highlight it green, problem solution red, and so on. Then at the very, very bottom, they would have to compare the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, which is the Twilight Zone episode, to other invisible enemies and just answer some questions here on the bottom. Now, some things I've noticed about this text is I don't have any official headings. I have larger text here, but I did not use the heading feature. So I always knew there was a heading feature here, but I thought that was just to make bigger text. I never realized it was to kind of organize a document. So this wouldn't be my official heading, but just to play around with it, I like how it has these tabs over here. My official heading would be more like COVID-19, something like that. And then do that. And then these other headings, I would use heading 2 for most of these. So there's all these headings in the article just to help a student if they're using screen reader. Make sure I use heading 2 for all of those. Another thing I noticed is if I have a colorblind student, my color coding would not work for them. So instead, I was thinking, how could I make this more accessible? Maybe they can still go through and annotate the article, but instead of color coding, they could use these tools instead. So cause and effect, if they see any of that in the article, they can bold it